Hello, Pivot Group. Greetings from Southern California. I look forward to seeing you next week. In the meantime, you get this introduction to R tutorial to do. Uh, so I've got introduction to R popped up here, and you guys have presumably gone through your first session tutorial to just get the navigation of R. And in my file folder, if I were to just be in the location of that, I could click on it and it'll pop up. So first thing that I need to do is get the data, and I've already provided the import dataset tutorial you can look at. We'll go ahead and load up this API strat data. It's right here, the CSV file. And when I pop it up, notice that it doesn't give me the variable names. So I'm going to click heading yes. Variable names are there. It just put an X in place of these row names, which is fine. That's not going to hurt anything. The other stuff looks good. So I'm going to do an import, and it pops up here in my environment, and I can see the file. Poke around there. Okay, now basically what we're going to do is just run through this set of scripts. So I've got some background info, you can read that. And to get help inside of R, that's important. For example, if you wanted help on the mean function, then I could type in $mean down here, and it's going to give me under help the help file for mean. I can also just click on the run button. You don't have to have your item highlighted. Wherever the cursor is out on the line is fine. Just click it and it does the same thing. Okay, so the idea here is to work you through a sample R session and see how the functions are working, and just get you some basic functions and a feel for how R works. The data we're going to use is this API Strat2. It's a stratified sample of some school data taken from California public schools in the year 1999 and 2000. Just taking a look here, I've got the name of the schools, the school type. E is elementary school, M is middle school, H is high school. We've got whether they're year-round or not, their API scores from the year 2099, as well as the average education of parents and the percentage of fully qualified teachers. Those are the variables. The variables are also given here in the file. Now, looking at data, if you type in the name of that data frame, then watch what happens. You get this big old clunky set of data, unwieldy. You'll be looking at much larger data sets as well. So you don't really want to do that. If it's helpful, as it sometimes is, to see data structure, there's a little cute command called head. And what head does is it only looks at the first 6 lines of your data. So that's one useful way to do it. Now, we're really interested in these API scores for the year 2000. And so it'd be cool if I could just run that and boom, show me those API scores. Doesn't work. Here's why. You may have multiple data frames with the same variable and they would conflict. So what we have to do is we have to say, hey, I want API 2000 from the API Strat2 data frame. You can think of this $sign that makes it happen as an apostrophe S. So it's like API Strat2's API 2000 scores. And here are all 200 of them. Okay, now these lines 57 and 58, I want to do a little bit of focus on. I have API Strat2 and there are two entries here inside of the braces. The first stands for the rows, the second stands for the columns. When I'm leaving the first entry blank, it means any row. So it's going to take all 200 rows, but it's only going to take column 5. So if you look, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. API 2000 is the 5th column. So when I run line 57, let's hit it, then you'll notice that it gave me the same data, namely those API scores. If I put in first position 1:6, and again, 1:6 is just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's going to give me only the first 6 rows of column 5. So let's try that. And you'll see that 805, 516, those values are the ones I called on. Okay, that's a little bit about actually just getting into data and having a handle on it. Now, there are a suite of commands that will do different analyses on the data. And frankly, that's largely what our time will be spent on, is learning some of the key commands, how to use them on the loaded data. So, some simple ones. The mean command does exactly what it says. It takes the arithmetic mean of the variable or the data that you put into that command. In this case, the mean for those API scores in 2000 is 652.82. I happen to know that there's a variable called API 99 in the same data set. If I compute the mean of those scores, it is 624. So we can look at the difference between the two means right there. There's a whole bunch of other commands that you can find, median, standard deviation, the minimum, maximum. And to get a summary, you can just run the summary command. It does a whole bunch of statistics all in one shot. And if you do summary on an entire data frame, it gives us, wow, a summary on each variable. You can take a look at that further. Now, I know I'm going fast, and my goal is not to explain every single thing, but to get you the exposure and the familiarity. It would be good to maybe go back through this and get a feel for it, so that when you come to our actual workshop, you've got that feel, and then you may have some specific questions to launch from. Okay, when it comes to categorical data, there is a very handy function called table. So if we look at just API Strat 2 by school type, let me hit run on only that sub piece. That's the 200 E, H, and M's. If I do the table command on it, and by the way, you'll notice the syntax is a function table, and then the parentheses, whatever's inside of those parentheses, is the arguments to that specific function. So with table, I want API Strat 2. If I hit enter right now, it's going to give me an error because that's a whole bunch of variables. It will only take a categorical variable and put it into a table for us. So API Strat 2 is S-type. That's going to give me 100 elementary schools, 50 high schools, 50 middle schools. Perfect. Now on line 72 here, what that did is no output, but I called ST equals table. And so when I type in ST, I've stored that table as an object ST. The ST is completely arbitrary. I just picked it as the first 2 letters of the variable name. Okay. Now, line 74, I'm going to obtain the length of that variable, its sample size, which is 200. So if I put ST over N, that's going to give me the proportion of those school types. And I'll leave it to you to run those next few lines to just get a couple of commands and see how to manipulate that. This table command can also be used to generate more than one variable's worth of table. So I'm going to call this SY, and you'll notice that I did API strat2 by school type and whether or not they're year-round. It generated this little table, so I only have one high school that's year-round, 2 middle schools year-round, 18 elementary schools out of this stratified sample. That's a very useful display. Line 84 here, this T stands for transpose. I'm just shifting the table. That may be useful for future commands to enter the tables in the appropriate format. This prop table command, you can take a look at it. It's going to give us proportions instead of the frequency values. We're almost done. The last thing I'd like to take a look at is basic graphs. We won't focus on this during the workshop, but I do want to give the commands to generate graphs even for the kind of data that we'll be looking at, namely data that has reweighted values. So a histogram, hist is the command, so we just run that and you'll see the histogram of the API 2000 scores. A scatter plot is called by the plot command. Your first argument is the x coordinates, second argument the y's. So take a look at that. Oh, I had this variable highlighted so it only displayed it. To run the whole thing, I needed to have my cursor simply on the row. And that produced the scatter plot of the two values. I'm going to run this next line, and it's going to give me a box plot of only the API 2000 values. That's a pretty boring plot. More interesting box plot is when you take the API 2000 values, but you plot them according to type. And we have 3 different types of school, and so we can see that looks like these elementary school API scores are higher than the high school and middle school on average. The middle line of the box is the median. Okay, I've got a couple of bar plots here. First one, straightforward bar plot. Any plot you do on R can always be tuned up to publication quality. So I added names there. And let's run a few more here. Let's see, what's this one? This one is just showing how to add the X labels and the Y labels. And let's just close out on a little more sophisticated bar plot. We can do that two-way table we'd created with the school types by whether or not they were year-round. And my last item here is just a cleanup. I can delete the values that I generated if you wanted to delete individuals. You can always use the clear command to clean everything out. It's not critical, but it can be useful to keep our workspace cleaned up. And that runs us through the whole set of scripts. So, as I said before, if you would run through those and have a little familiarity with how RStudio works, that'll help us to start the workshop all on the same page and able to follow along as we start to learn commands that will allow us to take data from a sophisticated survey and do a reweighting procedure on it. Thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you guys then.